Hey everybody, what's going on? Rob Cesternino. Yes, we are live here on the Survivor Know-It-Alls, and I'm very excited because we have a very special guest know-it-all this week with us because Stephen Fishbach is still on sabbatical, and we have a woman who actually does know it all. Please welcome back to the podcast, the great Sophie G. Clarke. Sophie,
Woo!
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm
crazy
spoiled.
Episode.
Yes, I'm spoiled now because now I saw you, what was it, 3 weeks ago tonight?
No, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
So,
I think it was 3 weeks ago.
Very excited. No, not enough. Not enough. Very excited to have you here with us. Filling in for Stephen Fishbach. Will you be trying to be extra Fishbach-y tonight?
I will. You know, as I was taking notes for this episode, I did realize that some of the things I was writing down were probably things that Stephen would have mentioned, which kind of disgusts me, but I also feel like I kind of have to do it because he's gone.
Okay, well,
the great man. Although I do feel bad that I'm not wearing plaid because I understand that's the dress code.
No dress code. That's optional. So very excited to have you here with us as we go through everything. We're going to take your questions. Hashtag RHAP. We've got a very fun day of podcasting coming up on Thursday. I will be speaking with Taylor Stocker, and we will get some answers about some things. Sophie, were you a big Taylor fan?
You know what? I think up until tonight, I didn't really care either way. I think seeing you a couple weeks ago helped remind me how big of an idiot he is with this thing. But tonight's episode, he just drove me insane. And I don't know if it's because I'm a little bit on edge because of all this election stuff, but that tribal council and just the logic that he was acting as if it was normal was insane, and it gave me a little bit of PTSD from the election.
You know what? Not necessarily the election, but I did find that like the debates, I felt like that there was a lot of like, you did this. Like, no, I didn't. I never said that. Please go to my website right now. Fact check right now on Twitter. I will tell you, I never ate any of that food. Yeah, it was.
Poor Ernest Adam is trying to be like, no, that just didn't happen. Like, it just didn't happen. And you see Taylor there and, just pulling on the heartstrings, being like, oh, the family visit, To me, it was, oh, God, it gave me the creeps.
A lot of stuff to talk through.
And then you have Jeff Probst. I'm very politically current right now. You have Jeff Probst normalizing the whole thing, saying, wow, this is a really bomb of a tribal council. It's not a bomb of a tribal council. He has an advantage that is built into the game, and it's a shitty advantage as it is. So Jeff was like not helping in any way. Jeff was like the media in this whole kind of election, All
right, Sophie, don't get too political tonight. No. This is an escape, okay? This is
okay.
All right, we have an Obama sweatshirt on.
I've been mourning. Okay, sorry. Let's talk about Survivor.
Yes, let's get back to Survivor. All right, so we've got a very busy Thursday, of course, coming up. Spencer Bledsoe is going to be my guest tomorrow on the recap, so excited to get into everything with him. You could email us your questions, and then I will get into your voicemails with RHAP, honorary historian, Megan Z will be joining me. Get your voicemails in robiswebsite.com/voicemail. And don't forget, get your questions into this show too, hashtag RHAP. So, Sophie, let's start with that tribal council, because I really did feel like that was one of the wildest tribal councils we've ever seen. I tweeted out that I thought that this was the longest time. If somebody get a stopwatch, I want to know how long was it in between hearing Jeff Probst talk at a tribal council? And was that the longest we've gone at any tribal council?
Yeah, I think it must have been. I have a feeling, Jeff gets like briefed before the tribal councils on these are all the things that are going on, bubbling underneath the surface. Like, see what you can do to try to, make some kind of storyline. I feel like in this tribal council, they just like all came out on their own all at once. You have Hannah like being the neurotic, girl that she is, like crying in the middle. You have Taylor bringing up the, the candy. You have Adam talking about his thing. I mean, it's all happening at once. It made me realize that this show doesn't, I don't know. I'm asking, does anybody, because I know there's like a lot of people out there watching there. I guess I'm only talking to you, but if anybody watches Jane the Virgin, it is like the most amazing like soap opera on TV. I feel like Survivor is turning into the soap opera where instead of like fixing storylines each week, it's just like every week a new storyline gets built on. You have the like revenging Fiji, you have hiding the candy, you have all this stuff, Gen X versus Millennials, Gen X versus Gen X. You have all these things that are just like building on top of each other. And I feel like usually in Survivor, things are kind of contained into one episode. And instead, this season is just like turning into this massive soap opera, and you're just wondering when the climax is. And tonight, I think, didn't help with any of that. It just kind of piled on and on and on. I loved it. I really loved it. I was trying to write down like all the different storylines that are happening right now, but I couldn't even think of them.
You couldn't type fast enough.
No. I was actually writing on these cute little puppy papers.
Oh, that's adorable. So yeah, it was really wild. And it really felt like that all of the drama was coming from the millennials. I mean, the Gen Xers were just like all sort of standing pat. And it did seem like that there was like friction going on between the Gen Xers. And it does seem like that's ready to explode. But this episode was just all about the millennials just all flying off the handle.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point. I think it's not about necessarily the personalities that are millennials or the personalities that are Gen Xers. I truly think this is an age thing. And you saw, I don't know who said it at the end, but one of the Gen Xers, maybe it was Chris. Okay, I'm totally like paraphrasing what happened here, but basically Chris was like, listen, we all get burned sometimes. It's like a matter of how you respond to that. And I think a lot of that comes with age. And you saw that, the Gen Xers have had a lot of friction on their tribe. They could have probably pulled off a pretty good blindside of Sunday without much drama tonight if they wanted to, and they decided not to, right? So you see that example of the Gen Xers who have the same kind of issues underlying their tribe, who are able to deal with it much more maturely. And then you see the millennials and the way that they just, can't even handle themselves. I truly think this is an age thing.
Yeah. Now, let's just talk about this idea of at the tribal council, everything, all the secrets being revealed. Sophie, did you ever have a tribal council that was quite as crazy as this? I mean, how about that one where it was at the final five with Albert getting the necklace from Brandon and then ultimately getting voted out? I mean, does that even compare to this?
God, you know what? I have so much memory loss from my season, and I think I'm going to blame that all on Brandon. But that definitely felt like one of those tribals. I think actually, looking back, the tribal of mine that most resembled the one tonight was probably one of the early tribals. And I don't remember exactly which one because they were all very similar. And that was, Brandon would suddenly decide to share his whole kind of life story and heart at each tribal and say, I was the one out to get Michaela, or I was actually gunning for you, Sophie, or like every tribal. What the hell is going on?
Right,
and then by the end of the tribal, it'd all be wrapped up. But yeah, we definitely have a little bit of that, more in the earlier part of the game.
Yeah, so that's very funny. So going back to tonight's episode, you did feel for Adam because as, Taylor starts to bring all of this stuff up, that first off, he starts with revealing the secrets, but then like the truth also was getting twisted, as we were talking about earlier, as Jay was coming in talking about how that he was like corroborating the story that Adam not only was in on knowing where the food was, but he also helped to find it or to hide it, and then was also eating it. And I always like to talk about on Survivor that I feel like that the person who's honest or that's being wrongfully accused takes the tact of, no, you have to believe me. Whereas the liar says, you know what, that you could think whatever you want, screw you. Like he wasn't going back on offense. I thought he was really very effectively defending his position. I hope people do believe him.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It reminded me of when I was like little, my sisters, I have two older twin sisters who bullied me a lot. And it was this, it was this infuriating thing when you're little, you know that you're right. And you're just this helpless person kind of looking at your parents, hoping that they'll believe you, begging them. And you have your sisters like kind of laughing, and like the way that Jay and Taylor were doing. I think it was Jay, or was it Taylor, who was almost laughing at Adam's pleading. Though Adam is like so close to kind of being a good player, right? Like he just needed, he was totally in the right in that situation, but he just didn't get ahead of the story, right? Like you had to know that was going to come out. You went in the water, you were gunning against these people. You told them you're going to vote them out. You know that he has nothing to lose. You know that story is coming out, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like Adam was so close to, Adam is so close often to being a good player, and he just kind of like misses this little thing.
Yeah, he did have the right idea in talking with Taylor, but I think that he needed to get out in front of this story where he knew that like this was if this was like some political scandal, like he knew it was going to be in the paper the next day, and he could have like come out in front of it and sort of like, cop to it. Right. And told his allies that he had pull them aside and tell them that he has this advantage, because he had to have known there's no honor there with Taylor.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but when you were watching the scene with Adam and Taylor in the water, were you thinking initially like, Adam, this is good? Because I was thinking initially like Adam was bringing Taylor back into the fold by being upfront and honest and saying, listen, like, you know, I knew I was on the block. I was ready to do anything, even vote you out. Like, to me, that just seems like what a great, honest, upfront way of playing that gains somebody's trust by basically saying to them, hey, I was ready to vote you out, but now let's be together. But like, he didn't finish that story. He was just like, yep, I was ready to vote you out. Now you're on the bottom.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but like, I thought that was going somewhere way different.
Yeah, I do feel like that Adam did have really good intentions. I thought that totally got misconstrued, that he was trying to rub it in. I think it just goes back to this idea of being able to deliver your message in different ways to different people. And I think that Adam just had a terrible read on how to connect and communicate with Jay, because that went over absolutely terribly. It could not have gone worse.
I agree. Where do you land on stealing food on Survivor? Like, if somebody did that in your season, what would you, what's your...
You know, I'm glad that you brought this up, because I was thinking about this with Taylor and I felt like, boy, I feel like that this is kind of a good idea in terms of what he did. The problem is it's really bad if you get caught. So I kind of think that he was onto something in terms of, hey, I'm eating regularly. This is an advantage for me. The problem is that he's just totally exposed on it. So he didn't actually get away with it. And so the idea of then also bringing people into his secret room was like making people also like give up their secrets. Is like, hey, I have this secret room. And he brings Adam in and Adam's like, okay, I have to tell you, I have an advantage. And then Jay is like telling him secrets also in terms of what he knows in the game. So everybody's just like giving up secrets, like, hey, here, have a banana chip. And then people are just spilling their guts out. So it was, you know, I feel like there's something there, but he just did a terrible job of letting everybody else who wanted to make a case for voting him out anyway, have it be another reason to disqualify him from the game.
Yeah, I agree. I think that stealing food is such a risky thing. At least for me, my feelings when I was out there were, you know, there's things that you do in the game, and then there's things that just make you a shitty person, and you can't claim that's gameplay. And on our season, for instance, Ozzy got into this whole mood of saying that he was going to go out and catch fish only for his own tribe. And looking back, maybe that wasn't so bad, but at the time, it just felt like, listen, I get that we're all against each other, but we're also starving together, and like we're keeping up the fire, like everybody's playing their part, and it's like a bit extreme to like further somebody's starvation. And I remember when I watched Tyson, I think it was on Blood versus Water, I think he stole coconuts with Gervais. Jervis?
Yeah, that's the Spradlin pronunciation.
And I remember just getting super pissed. I personally just feel like it's outside of the bounds of the game. But I agree with you. Like, I think your example is great. Like, if you can use it as a way to truly bring people in, then I can see, you know, a scenario in which that's not just about feeding your own hungry, selfish stomach. But I don't think Taylor was in that camp.
But you brought up a really good point.
Adam just bring the food.
Yeah, poor Adam. We brought up a really good point about Tyson, where Tyson was going off and stealing the coconuts. So he was getting the sustenance. He wasn't telling other people. And the one person who was sort of his, partner in crime on that, Jervis, like that really helped like foster a bond between them. So that's like the perfect example of like how to do that correctly. But I mean, Taylor was just busted from the second that he first started to do it.
I think it's such another, I think one of my favorite things about Survivor is that I totally disagree with Boston Rob that there are any rules to Survivor. I just believe that everything is situational. And this is such a good example of like stealing food. You can't say it's good. You can't say it's bad. It depends on, are you able to pull it off? And are you doing it in the right situation with the right people? So
I do think that there was something to Taylor that I had been asked on Twitter earlier tonight, that is Taylor the worst Survivor player ever? And no, I don't believe that he is. I think that there's a lot of worse players. I do think that there was something to him, that he did seem to have a charisma about him that at least made some people feel like, I mean, they didn't seem like people hated him. He got away with probably more than he should have.
I mean, he also left with a girlfriend, a drinking buddy. Come on. Nobody could say he's the worst Survivor.
More than he even knew. Yeah.
He came away with a real prize, Rob. Is he the worst Survivor player ever?
No.
I really don't want to think about Taylor much after this. I think he really does represent like everything that's worst about millennials. I've become recently, not to go back to the election, but I've become recently very obsessed with that girl, Tommy Lauren, who's this total batshit right-wing nut on Facebook. And
Yes.
I finally like got up the courage to watch her post-election video, which I knew was just
Why, Sophie? Why are you watching that?
It took me a week. But the thing that she does is she calls us all snowflakes. So any like millennial protester, she refers to as like a snowflake. And the idea is that your parents told that you were special. So like anybody who's a millennial, grew up thinking they were a snowflake. And I just got really angry listening to her talk about this because I'm like, screw you. I have a job. I have a profession.
Because you're a millennial.
I'm not a fucking snowflake.
Yes.
But watching this and watching Taylor, I was like, oh my God, what a fucking snowflake. Like she is the worst.
Yeah. All right. Well, Sophie, that let's just think about the millennials and the Gen Xers on the island right now. This will help. This will help. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. What's next? What's on my list?
Jeff talked about how sometimes in this game there's consequences and there's also strategy. Do you feel like that this was a consequence for him eating the food, or was this going to happen to him no matter what?
I think it was a bit of a consequence. I think that my guess is that there was a lot going on behind the scenes of that episode, right? There was the Sunday thing really seemed like it was a ball that was rolling that was stopped. There was supposed to be a split vote. There was only one vote for Adam. So I think that there could have been a possibility for Jay to go home that night, potentially even Sunday to go home that night. And it seemed to me like in Tribal that he really got the knife, the final, whatever that's called.
Yeah. You said that earlier about how Sunday might be going home, and I didn't get that from the episode.
No, sorry, I meant Jessica.
Jessica's plot. Yes, that Sunday. I mean, this was like a coming out party for Sunday in this episode, and I really did feel like that we were going to be getting that at the Tribal Council. I thought that maybe it was going to be a misdirect where then all of the young guys, the millennials of Jay and Will and Taylor, were going to be safe, and that this plan was going to come together ultimately. That Sunday doesn't care for Jess. Did you think that was how it was going to go, or did you think that was a red herring the whole time?
No, I definitely thought it was how it was going to go. And I thought that the split vote thing was going to give her a lot of opportunity to be able to, follow through in this plan. I don't think the plan fell apart at Tribal Council. It probably didn't make it to Tribal Council, but it did seem like the votes were very heavily in Taylor's favor way rather than Jay, in a way that I think was influenced at Tribal Council. But the thing with the Sunday and Jessica thing is incredible, right? Like Survivor didn't need that storyline in this episode. There was enough happening. Yeah. It's the same like soap opera type season where they're just building story into story that's foreshadowing the next episodes.
Yeah, it does seem like that we're headed in that direction. I wonder, Sophie, do you think that this was the kind of thing where Chris might have been in the Sophie role, where basically was Sunday the Albert here in this spot, where she has this idea, here's this big move, she talks to Brett about it. He says, okay, let me go talk to Chris about it. And then we never saw anything else about it from the episode. Do you think that Chris ended up putting his foot down and say, this is a terrible idea? Why would we do this? We finally have an advantage of the Gen Xers to the millennials that we can basically, knock all these kids out of the game at this point. Why on earth would we vote out a Gen Xer in this spot?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think either Chris put the kibosh or maybe even Sunday realized that it wasn't the time. But I think you're totally right. Like as exciting as that would have been, and as I definitely think that is brewing. It seems like a terrible move to make at this point, right? The Gen Xers, they have a lot of power right now. They have Zeke, they have Adam, etc. The other thing I would worry if I was Sunday is they don't really have the numbers, right? They would have had the numbers to do it at that Tribal, but but Zeke is more tied to David, who's, on the other side of the Gen X divide. I can't remember who Adam's tied to, but I don't think it's as clear. I don't think it's not time, obviously, for her to make the move.
Yeah, I was actually very encouraged by seeing Sunday as a player because we had been calling her Purple Sunday and she hadn't really been doing too much of anything so far this season. But she did seem like she's a person out there who is at least, playing the game and potentially even playing the game hard.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I don't want to make this comparison because it seems too easy, but my worry with Sunday is a little bit of the Dawn worry, and that's that she's playing the game hard, but like you saw the way that she scruffled Jay's head, and to me, it seemed like he was looking up towards a bit of a mother figure. I always worry with players like that, players who, get people to flock to them in this very maternal outside of the game way, that it's going to come back to bite them in the butt, because when they do try to do this thing of like, I'm strategic and I'm going to make moves, people feel like very, very hurt by it.
Yeah.
So I think she's going to do it. I think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to end well for her.
Yeah, that's always a problem with the mom role. You have to really sort of just walk that line of being the tough mom and not letting people feel that maternal thing to you, because if you do screw them over, as you said, it's always a problem. Glad you brought up Dawn Meehan tonight, because I believe, Sophie, that this was the immunity challenge that she won in South Pacific.
Oh my God, is it? Because I thought Whitney won this one.
Did Whitney win? I remember Dawn was right there at the end, but I feel like I remember seeing Dawn with the necklace around her neck, and then Dawn was like, "I'll stay up here longer so you guys can eat more food." But did she go home because she was right? Was she right there?
It was Jim, Whitney, and Dawn. Jim went home. I think Whitney won. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And maybe that was the case they made, a vote out Dawn because everybody likes her. We should vote her out.
Yeah. Whitney won this challenge. Yes. Whitney was good.
And and then was it a double tribal council in that episode also? And then Whitney went out in the same episode? I'm pretty sure that was the case.
No. Man, Rob, you really are you this historian or something? Do you want me to remind?
Yeah, bro, you were there. You were there.
Can you edit this out so people don't know about this?
Pretty sure I did an exit interview with them both on the call at the same time, but maybe it was...
No. Dawn and Whitney got voted out in the same episode. That was the episode that Jim got voted out in. Dawn and Whitney got voted out in the episode that I won both of the immunity challenges in.
Okay. Look, I'll take your word for it. So then, in terms of some of the other players that we haven't gotten to talk about too much tonight, Zeke and Will, they sat out the challenge. Sophie, any issue with those two in that spot? I feel like I have less of an issue for Zeke. Will says that he knows he's not going to beat those surfer guys. Do you have any issue with Will sitting out?
I need your help on this, Rob. Why don't I like Will?
Why don't you like him? I don't know.
There's something very unlikable about him, right?
Very unlikable about him, Sophie. Wow. I can't believe, I feel like that you were someone who played the game as a very young person. I mean, he's not like a total bump on a log. So why are you against Will?
I don't know. I felt really bad. I was
hating him also.
She has been?
Yeah, she's been killing him on Twitter.
Oh God, I'll have to ask her why I hate him then. I don't hate him. I mean, I don't even know the kid, but I think there's something kind of like bumbling yet false. There's something like false confidence that he has. And I think it's probably just the tone of his voice, which like, I really don't want to talk about voices. I know my voice is grating to everybody on the podcast, so apologies. But I think that there's probably something unfortunate, probably not something he's doing, that makes him come across a little bit as if he's really confident, feels like he's doing really well, and yet we haven't really seen any proof of that in the screen. And I think the example is like him sitting out the challenge. Like, what the hell, dude? Like, you're a once in a lifetime opportunity. You're never going to win this game. Who knows how much longer you're going to be in here? And you're like giving it up for a sandwich. And this is coming from somebody who sat out. So
yeah. So you feel like that he was overconfident for such a young person in the game, that you feel like his attitude should be more like, I'm 18 years old. I have no idea what I'm doing right now. You guys help me. I just don't want to get voted out. So you feel like that he should be more of that vibe, sort of like looking for just hiding in plain sight more?
No, I just feel like he's the guy who ends up in jail because he was an accessory to the crime.
No, stop with that making a murderer. they let him out. They let him out.
That's awesome. No, I think he's just so excited to hang out with his bros, to be there with Taylor and Jay. It's like, they're like in college. I don't know. I'm projecting a lot onto Will.
He's not even in college. He's like a high school kid hanging out with the college guys. That's right. These guys are really cool. They're in college. Well, I don't know if they're in college, but anyway. So no, I think he's actually in the best position to get out of this. That I think that Jay is now the public enemy number one. I think everybody's coming for him. And now Will, I think, has a really good shot. I believe Will voted for Jay tonight.
I think he did. And did Jay vote for Taylor tonight?
I think that Jay voted for Taylor. I think that
And
the
Taylor
one
voted for
vote for Adam was from Taylor.
Yeah.
So I think that they probably sort of like signaled to Taylor that he was going to be the person going home, which I think was bad news for Adam, because then Taylor had no reason to sort of keep Adam's secrets anymore.
Yeah. Listen, I'm going to say sorry for what I said about Will. I mean, I don't know. Listen, like I'm watching him on screen. I feel like I have to have an opinion about him. I really hope he redeems himself, but I think it's the Muppet. I don't really know.
Okay.
I think it's awesome he's 18 and out there.
Yes. Sophie, talk to me about Hannah and where she's at, because I felt like if Steven was here, I think he would say that he would feel very good about her edit and at least the direction that it's going. We saw Hannah telling us about how she feels like, boy, she's actually out here. She's playing with the intention of trying to win now. She really feels very confident about where she's going and what she's doing. She's not just being a goat now for Taylor. Are you starting to feel good about Hannah?
No, definitely not. I've actually met Hannah in person. She's very nice. That's my preface. So a couple things about Hannah. One is that I do think she's falling into a similar kind of Dawn trap, but is more like the Cochrane Trap, which is if you're the neurotic person and you form your relationships by having everybody's relationship to you is, oh, poor Hannah, I'm going to calm her down. I'm going to keep her relaxed. I think we saw Jay doing that to her in this episode. Was it Jay that was like complimenting her on her flop?
Yes.
On her flip. Yeah. Like if you put yourself in that scenario of you being so neurotic around everybody and like looking for people's affirmation, I think it really makes it hard for them to then go ahead and vote for you when you stab them in the back. Right. Because it's like, I was the one I felt like I was bringing you through this whole season and now you want me to vote for you. Right. Like Cochrane had a bit of that, I think, problem when he flipped on people. So I definitely worry about that with Hannah in general. Like how will she be able to gain people's respect in the final tribal when she acts the way she does? So that's one worry. The other thing I noticed.
Could we talk more about that for a second?
Yeah.
Just in terms of that, I think you're onto something interesting, because this idea of the Cochrane Trap, where you say that you feel like when you are somebody that's very emotionally needy, that's almost like a currency in the game. And then when people are sort of like having to take care of you, then we saw like in Caramoan, where how upset Brenda is when Dawn ultimately screws her over.
Yeah, exactly.
How many people get mad at Cochrane when he flips in South Pacific. So that I feel like that you gave him a lot of advice before he went to go play the second time, before he ultimately won. Did you talk to him about that?
I think I remember having a conversation with Cochrane saying, don't ask people to open your coconuts for you. And that's the only advice I remember giving him. But I think, I feel like we've had this conversation before. Either I've had it with you or I've had it with other people. And it definitely, I would say, is one of the main ways that Cochrane's game changed, right? He became somebody who kind of dictated his own destiny and didn't become somebody that lifted people around him up because of his own insecurities, right? Like that's how he gained a lot of the trust in his Hawaii tribe, by saying like, oh, you guys are so cool. Look how white I am. Can I go swimming with you? And like, if you're the person, next to that guy, you feel really great about yourself. And you're like, hey, let me take you under my wing. Like you see a little bit with Chris and David, right? Mm-hmm. If you're in that like small position, it makes it easy for people to align with you. It doesn't make it easy for people to forgive you when you stab them in the back, because they feel like they gave a lot to you. So I just have a feeling. So my premonition with Hannah is that this is going to just continue and continue and continue. I don't think she's going to make the finals. I think she's going to end up stabbing people in the back who feel as if they supported her emotionally through the game. And that's going to make people mad.
So you could see her as a 0 vote finalist, potentially.
I could see her as a 0 vote finalist.
Yeah. I think that's definitely, on the tree of outcomes for Hannah.
Yeah. My other thing with Hannah is that the whole thing, and I wrote this down somewhere on one of these little notes, is that one of the things, I think we've talked about it before, one of the things I really dislike in kind of new Survivor, I don't know what era of Survivor that's in, but I don't like how meta it gets and how people talk about Survivor and how people seem more aware that they're going to be on TV. Like, to me, the beauty of Survivor is watching somebody be themselves on television and not be the way that they know they're going to look on TV. And so I think that for that reason, when I watch this season, as much as I love kind of Zeke and Adam, they seem definitely very influenced by the fact that they're fans. Like to me, it seems like they know that when they're speaking. And so I think that we're getting like less of a raw, pure view of them. And I'd put Hannah in that category too. And so like even the move that she made where she's like, I made this big move. It was all in the context of being like, I'm not going to be the GOAT, so I made a move. And like the move wasn't even necessarily that big. She had no, I don't know if it was that good. I'm sure that's something you debated on the last episode, but like she had no real alliances with the people in the big group that she was making the move with. So to me, it seemed like this folly of watching too much Survivor, hearing too much of Jeff saying, don't be a GOAT, make big moves, and her like doing that on the surface, but not actually taking control in any like substantive way, right? She didn't form any relationships. She doesn't have anything lasting to get her through the next episode. Like she did something, but she didn't really do anything.
That's interesting thought that you feel like that there's an idea that's maybe out there where the person on the in the game is almost playing to the people at home and the people on Twitter, but they're not the people that are ultimately gonna vote for this. You know, this isn't an American Idol type season where it's like, okay, now vote for your favorite. Who do you think is the Sprint fan favorite player of the week? It's you have to ultimately win by getting the most people on the island to still like you and vote for you at the end of the game when you get there. So that is a key point in terms of trying to win the Fishy Award every week.
I agree. And so I prefer to watch it. And I have more respect for players who, instead of talking about their game and the words that we use to talk about the game, and words like goats and big moves, instead I prefer to hear them talk about the game in the way that they're actually thinking about the game, which is, I think I really just formed a deep relationship with David because I, backstabbed the person that he hated on his tribe. And maybe wasn't the best thing for my game, but it certainly strengthened this one relationship, And so I feel like when people take it a step above of like trying to see where they fit in the world of Survivor, I get disinterested and I have a feeling that it doesn't pay off in the end.
So do you enjoy watching the Gen Xers more as characters because they have less of that?
I think I do. I really like Chris. I really like David. Even like Brett getting drunk, Brett didn't say when he was getting drunk, man, I bet you I know I'm only the third player to get drunk in the history of Survivor. It wasn't like this, I'm on a reward challenge and like nobody's ever got, it was this authentic moment. So I think I do prefer the Gen Xers.
Sophie, this was a pretty boozy episode of Survivor, right? Do you think that overall that this is going to be a boozy season?
Except for Will, right?
Except for Will, right. And I have a feeling we have some questions about that in terms of Will's drinking. But yeah, it seems like that they really were maybe felt like, okay, we have a lot of millennials here. They're going to want to drink. Millennials love to drink. But it did turn out that the Gen Xer was the biggest drinker in the group.
I feel like they read like a behind the scenes of The Bachelor and they were like, whoa, the Bachelor producers just get them hammered. Like, why don't we do that? And actually when it was happening, I was like, wow, I wonder if Brett's going to reveal that he's a police officer. So it's not the worst idea.
Yeah. No, not a great idea though to drink a lot. Did you ever get drunk on Survivor?
I've said this before, but I was quite tipsy at the final tribal council. We got champagne that morning at breakfast and I put it in my water bottle. Every time somebody says something mean, I took a swig.
Yeah, so that's good. Yeah, well, I think that it gave you some extra confidence, right?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. I mean, I think that overall, and again, I did get tipsy a couple times. I never, yes, I did. I
thought you were only on one episode. How'd you get
tipsy? Sophie, come on. That's a different season. I got, pretty boozy a couple times, but never to the point where I was out of control. I think that that's, a bad look to get to the point where you could be potentially have people take care of you or potentially giving away any of the secrets. I mean, Brett, I suspect can hold his liquor, even if he had 8 or 9 drinks.
That's crazy, though. 8 or 9 drinks on not eating for a month. That's really insane.
Yeah.
It made me like Brett a lot more, though, right? He was kind of charming.
It was a good character moment for him. I really, and he, look, kudos to him. He did not get sloppy from what we saw.
Yeah, kudos to him.
Now, Sophie, could you talk a little bit about your experience with Zeke? Now, I know a lot of the listeners know this, but maybe not everybody, that you actually had the opportunity to play Survivor with Zeke some time ago, that back in, what, was it 2013 or 2014, that you were in a season of Survivor called Survivor Brooklyn.
A little known season.
Yes.
I was. I think it was 2014.
Okay.
I was on Survivor Brooklyn. You should all look it up on YouTube. With Zeke and with Andrea Belke. Spoiler, Andrea won. And yeah, I did play with Zeke. It's funny watching Zeke on TV because, to be honest, so when I played Survivor Brooklyn, I showed up and I thought that Andrea and I thought nobody would know who we were. And so we were just going to like sneak in and do really well. And for a little while, I was like, oh my God, I'm doing so well. And then somebody finally was like, listen, we're all fans here. We all know who you are, which really felt shitty because I thought I was just like really good at Survivor. And this was like validating that like I could even do well in Survivor Brooklyn.
Yes.
It turned out, I'm pretty sure the only reason Andrea and I did well is because they all just wanted to hang out with us.
It was like a Coach and Cochrane type thing.
Exactly. And it was like this give and take between like they wanted to prove that they were good Survivor players to us, but also just like really wanted to hang out. Anyway, so it's awesome for me. You know, this must be like what Coach felt watching Cochrane on his second season, because for me, you know, watching my student Zeke, I have to say I'm very proud. You know, when I played with Zeke, I had this another guy, Danny, and Zeke and Danny were really just like, they were my, my amigos. Exactly. They were my proteges. And so really seeing Zeke thrive and come into his own, I hope he can win. So just like Coach, I can take credit for his win as well. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Is there anything that you have seen from Zeke this season that you feel like that he might have picked up from playing the game with you?
Other than everything.
Everything good. None of the bad stuff.
But I do wonder, right? Like Zeke played, I think he played one Survivor Brooklyn, but I think he maybe even played Big Brother Brooklyn. And I do wonder if that's helped him a little bit. He's obviously like such a great character, and the confessionals in Survivor Brooklyn, I think I'm sure his were amazing. But I do think that probably playing games like that helped him on the show. I think that even just being in that scenario of knowing what it feels like to be unsure if people are out to get you, and having that, people always say when they go back at the second time, right, is that the reason winners don't do well the second time is they've never had that experience of being voted out. Like they don't know the warning signs. And when you've already been voted out, you kind of know like what the warning signs are. And I know it's Survivor Brooklyn, I know it's on YouTube, and it's only 10 minutes long, but I feel like Zeke, having gone through that experience and seen those warning signs, it might help him. We'll see.
The dress rehearsal.
Very crude one.
And so I look that up, Google it, or look for it on YouTube. Sophie, did we get to talk at all about Ken when we talked to you at the Know-It-Alls a couple of weeks ago? Do you ever take on Ken? He almost said nothing in this episode.
His abs said everything, Rob.
His abs said everything. He did win immunity, but really that we never got to the take of him and Jessica, who Jessica was the target of Sunday's plot. I don't know if she even had a confessional tonight. And then Ken, we didn't really hear anything from him.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know if I imagine on this show you talk a lot about winners edits because of Steven. But I thought
try not to as much.
I thought in the beginning of the game that Ken was getting like a really great edit, especially for somebody who's just kind of like a Ken doll who you'd imagine doesn't necessarily need to speak to, you know, show off his assets. And so I was really surprised this episode to see that he didn't get any airtime. And I have to believe that's still good for his winners edits. They wouldn't have, you know, put so much investment in him in the early part of the season. But I like Ken a lot, you know, like I think I put the Ken in that category of like being very authentic to himself. You know, it's obvious that he has close relationships, and I look forward to seeing his abs become more defined.
More and more defined. Okay.
You see that tonight? It was crazy. There was like down the side.
Yeah. Like, just don't say he's like a Ken doll. He doesn't like that.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
He's like a new age cool Ken doll. I don't know.
I rarely hear you talk about a Survivor crush.
Oh, well, Ken is mine.
Okay. Look at you, Sophie.
Can we talk about voting blocks? Because I have a lot of thoughts on them.
Go for it.
And I want to talk about this because I know this is like Steven's thing. And so I feel like it'll make him happy if we talk about voting blocks because like whatever, he invented them. Mm-hmm. I don't think that voting blocks is what's happening on this season. Like I know that they're referring to them as voting blocks, and tell me if you disagree with me. But my understanding of voting blocks is like returner season. Nobody cares about personal relationships with anybody. At each 3 days, it's totally, you know, separate from the previous 3 days. A group gets together, votes out whoever they think is the biggest threat. The next day, another group gets together, votes out whoever they think is the biggest threat. Steven says he coins a turn, feels really good about himself, season's over. I don't think that's what's happening on this season. Like they're referring to themselves as voting blocks, right? They've definitely referred to it. But to me, like, this is not voting blocks. Like, this is the soap opera season where there truly are so many different ways that people are connected and so many different storylines happening at once that it's not really voting blocks. It's more just like a very, very complex web of alliances, almost the way that you see on Big Brother. Like, the thing I love about Big Brother that I think the Survivor often misses is that Big Brother, because you're sitting in this house and because you're talking to each other so much, there's so many interwoven kind of alliances and onions and cross alliances. And I think you're seeing that on this season where it's not voting blocks, it's Gen X and millennials, and then there's divides in each tribe, and then there's personal relationships, and then there's a relationship where you see the food, and then there's the idol, and then she saw the idol, and then, you know, there's all these. It's not voting blocks, it's alliances, and there's just many of them, and they decide to vote for different people each week.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point, Sophie. So sort of like in the way that, and we talked about this before the merge, that this was a unique season in that everybody in the game had been to tribal council at least twice going into the merge, where everybody was, people were all intermingled between, they had like a big 10-person tribe, and then they were on a different 6-person tribe. So there were lots of different connections, almost in the same way that in a returning player season, all the returnees sort of know each other from before the game even starts. So you have that familiarity, and that does create a lot of complex situations where it's not like South Pacific, where you have, okay, it's Upolu versus Savai'i, to the death. And, Cochrane flips and he's, and he's an a-hole because he flipped against Savai'i. And how could he go ahead? It's like anybody could sort of go in any direction here. I do think that there is something to the fact that there are sort of pairs that seem like that like you don't see like Ken flipping on Jessica, and it looks like, Chris and Brett are pretty tight, and maybe Zeke and Chris also have something together. Jay and Taylor weren't going to flip on each other, even though Jay did vote for Taylor, but that was sort of like, the writing was on the wall. But so I feel like that we do have like little pockets of people that we could play around with, and maybe that's sort of like the idea of voting blocks, but it is a very unpredictable season.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I also like that the voting blocks themselves are I think the reason I don't really want to use the term voting block is that it came into coinage during a returning players season, where I feel like real relationships really aren't formed. Like, there's voting blocks because people make pregame alliances, or they, agree to something when they're there, but they're not actually based on relationships. And what I think makes this season so much better, and what I think makes the alliances that are happening now different from voting blocks, is that there are these many, many small alliances, but they're based on real events and on real emotions. So you have Taylor avenging Fiji being voted out. Nobody was avenging anything on a returning player season with voting blocks. You have the Gen X blind side that created a huge rift, right? So I just think that the voting blocks, if we want to give that to Steven, are much more charged emotionally this season, which is just making it a lot more interesting to watch.
Yeah. And just to a degree also, I think that part of that was, and talking about that tribal council, was just sort of a bit of a cutesy way to sort of evade a lot of Jeff's questioning of like, so what's the alliance? It's like, Jeff, this season, there are no alliances. This is voting blocks. This is totally different. So it was able to sort of like, be able to, from the PR perspective at Tribal Council, to be able to say, no, those people are on the outs. Like, no, this is a season where everybody is working together in these voting blocks. Because I think that the reason that you can point to why maybe voting blocks is not necessarily a thing. I mean, look at the guy who won that season in Jeremy, that he was the person that was the most trusted and the most liked among that entire group. It wasn't the person who really just like bounced around from alliance to alliance, mastering the voting blocks.
And so if Jeremy is our model, who would be that person in this season?
Who is the Jeremy? I mean, I feel like that the person who I think has been building the most relationships, I would say that Zeke is that person in the season, because he has that relationship where how many people would say that they trust them the most or the second most? I think that he's probably the person with the most of those connections in this season.
Yeah, but I mean, I can only hope then that Zeke learned from Survivor Brooklyn, where in the 7th episode, there was a challenge where we all had to kind of do the thing where you write down, who is the smartest person, and you all say, and somebody asked, who would you trust with your life? And almost everybody said Sophie, and then I immediately got voted out. And so I can only hope that, Zeke realizes, I just feel like maybe this episode where he sat out was him basically making it too obvious and too obvious that he was comfortable because of these relationships.
Yeah. And just to go back to Tyson, though, I do think that one of the things that Tyson says as a counter argument to that is sort of like by proving that it's like, oh, I don't really need it. Like, it's almost like that, not necessarily that you're overconfident, but it's sort of like, oh, he's not trying that hard. I think that's sort of like, he's not like going after this with all of, his might.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's true. I think Zeke is funny enough. He should be able to spin it as like some stupid thing that he did. But we'll see.
Yeah. All right, Sophie, let's get into some of these questions from the listeners here. Hashtag RHAP. And why don't we start you off with this question from Jason McDaniel? Could Adam have used his advantage to steal the reward for his team? We really don't know exactly how this is going to work. Do you sense that he could steal a team reward?
I got the sense that you could, and I think it would have been a good. I think it would have been a good move. I don't know if somebody said that on the chat thing, or I feel like my memory is the worst. But I think he should have. I've always felt this about idols too, that to me, the more idols, the more advantages, the more uncertainties in the game. And that sometimes the best thing to do is to make the uncertain certain. And honestly, Adam's thing is not good enough for him to really save it. I think if I was Adam and you're nervous that episode, right? You use it immediately. You say, guys, I won this advantage. I want to get it out of the game. I don't want to have it. I'm going to take the advantage. We're going to go do whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it is probably a good spot to use it in that he would be making 5 people very happy to do it. He'd also be making 6 people very mad. So maybe it's also that he, like, in a spot where maybe it's an individual reward, he's only really pissing off one person, but at least he's making 5 people happy potentially if he uses it here. But, we really poo-pooed the idea of this advantage last week in terms of it's so stupid. Who's even going to ever use it? But I have to say, I mean, wasn't that the impetus of a lot of the drama in this episode? The fact that, hey, everybody, guess what? Adam has an advantage and he's not sharing it with you. So everybody ended up getting, I mean, that whole blow up at Tribal Council was because they put this advantage in the game. It's so that these survivors are so petty, like any little stupid thing could turn into a fight.
I mean, exactly. That's why he should have gotten rid of it immediately. It's like when you're playing hearts, and you have the Jack of Spades or the Queen of Spades, and all you want to do is get rid of that goddamn Queen of Spades, or else it's going to come back to bite you. I feel like the advantage was the Queen of Spades, and he should have gotten rid of it in this episode. And he could have, even if he could only use it for one person, he should have still Taylor's reward, right? He's not on Taylor's team. What a great opportunity to screw somebody over that he doesn't even have an alliance with, go on a reward and have it out of the game. Yeah. Instead, he's sitting with the Queen of Spades in his hand, and his hand is getting smaller, and he's going to get screwed.
And this is something Steven and I talk about all the time, but I think that there's only 2 modes with these idols and advantages. Either nobody knows that you have it and you keep it 100% secret and don't trust anyone with it, or you get it out of your hands as soon as possible, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, we had a very similar thing on my season. I don't know if you remember, but there was an episode where we staged a fake finding of the idol. Yes. And it was exactly for this kind of thing. It was the thing of like an idol that some people know about, but not everybody knows about. It's too much of an unknown. It's too much, there's too many variables. And so it's actually better for us in a way to kind of make it into a public thing that wasn't so scary anymore.
Yeah, and then what did Coach do? He thanked God for helping him find the idol he already found, or he prayed to God to help him find the idol that he already found?
He prayed to God.
Yes.
And God delivered, Rob.
He came through. Jake Larson wants to know, why do they never show the choosing of teams and challenges? I think it would be interesting strategy. Sophie, did you ever do the pick'em challenges in South Pacific?
No, we didn't. But I actually thought they were going to choose this time because I don't think they do the pick 'em that often. And Jeff almost built it up this episode. I was like, oh, we're going to see. I think it's weird to do the pick 'em and then not show the pick 'em.
Yeah, it came up last season where your daughter, Aubrey, ended up last season. She was also in charge of being the captain of one of the teams. And honestly, I forget off the top of my head if she did. I think she did a bad job picking out the teams, but it might have been that she did a good job. She was one of the captains. And then it was the same thing with Hannah tonight, where she did a bad job picking the teams and Chris just really smoked her in terms of the draft.
Yeah, I suppose that they might as well do a pick 'em, and then if something interesting happens, they can show it. And in this case, the only thing interesting happened was that Hannah didn't do a good job picking, and so you don't actually have to show the picking to tell that story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think watching people pick tribes is actually that good TV. So
Yeah, it did just make it seem like, I said, maybe Hannah's getting voted out tonight because they made a point of saying, okay, Hannah picked out this team and they did really bad. And Hannah was talking about, I'll never be a captain of sport. And then ultimately her team lost. And I thought that maybe people were going to be piling on, but nobody seemed to care.
Yeah, because Rob, this is the soap opera of all seasons of Survivor. There's like a billion storylines happening at once, and this is just another one. Hannah. Yeah, exactly. Hannah can't pick a tribe.
Okay, Sophie, what does Byron Hussey have to say?
What a name! Why does Taylor think no one noticed he stole food if it was a topic at Tribal last week? Weird edit.
Yeah. He did seem to feel like that maybe he thought that people thought he ate food, but not necessarily had a stash.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. I think that's definitely right? Like last time somebody saw him eating food, but I don't think anybody woke up other than Adam and saw him actually going off with food. It makes me kind of weirded out though, that like, how did they not know how much food was left? Right? Mm-hmm. Like they must have thought he ate a shit ton of food then.
Yeah, well, he tried to say like, it was a medical emergency, dude. And then it was really that he just filled up all these things. I don't think it was clear to us what he was doing last week because he said like, I'm really good with mason jars. So I just started eating everything. Like, well, what does that have to do with mason jars? That I don't think it was clear that he was hiding food in the glass jars and then burying them.
Yeah. How bad do you feel for that unborn child, Rob?
I'm sure that he or she will look. Like, think of all the baby food that could be being stored right now, Sophie.
In a mason jar. God, that's so millennial too. I'm really good with mason jars.
Really good with mason jars. That's right. All right.
Put my kombucha in them.
Jack wants to know, what's the drinking age in Fiji? Scott lets us know it's 18. A lot of people wanted to know, Sophie, why wasn't Will allowed to drink? He should be allowed. He's 18. Why not give this kid some booze?
I don't know. I mean, who fucking cares? I don't want to see Will drink, right? Like, he's a little... Oh, God.
No, here's the answer. Here's the real answer.
No, there's no... Okay, fine.
This is the real answer. Survivor is a show that is on at 8 o'clock at night on a major network with major sponsors, and it's not a good look for this show to take a kid who's in high school and take him out on TV and get him drunk and then broadcast that in America and be like, hey, he wasn't in America, so we got him wasted. I mean, is he going to be able to handle his alcohol? What if he gets sick on TV or something happens to him? It's just why? Why would Survivor take the risk? Sophie.
I don't know. Trump has made me question everything about my life in the world.
This has nothing to do. Look, Sophie.
Because who knows now? Maybe they should have done that. Good, all coverage is good coverage.
They should get Will drunk.
Yeah.
Morgan Cora says, why didn't Adam just toss the reward into the fire? Toss it in the fire. Toss it in the fire.
I thought he was going to do that, actually. I tried, but I thought he was going to do that.
Yes.
This is what I mean about Adam, like being kind of on the brink of being a good player. Adam is like somebody who studied the game so much that he's like kind of making himself look like maybe he knows what's going on, but he doesn't actually have the intrinsics needed to win the game.
Yeah. Well, he needs to work on his social game. And, I think that there's still room for improvement here. I mean, it's only day 24, but it's really the social game. It's like he understands the strategy. I think he knows, we've talked about that. Like, he knows the right things to be doing, but for some reason, he's just not having that connection with people in terms of making them feel like that they can trust him.
And it's funny because I actually didn't see that before this episode. I think I saw a glimpse of it after he aligned with the Gen X on his tribe to get out Fiji. The Gen Xers who were on his tribe were even saying, maybe let's go with Taylor. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? Adam seems like a stand-up kid. He just went with you. And now you're talking about blindsiding Adam. So I think there's been hints of like, maybe there's not something quite right about Adam. But I don't know about you, but I didn't really see it before this episode. And this episode, to me, is very OTTN, like putting, the stake in his heart of, I don't think Adam can win the game, right? There was like a lot of dislike.
OTTN. Well, I did see that Zeke and Hannah were very much saying like, hey, guys, we got to get rid of them. And I like that from Zeke and Hannah that they were sort of like keeping the door open with the millennials. Hannah, I couldn't tell if she was having another panic attack or she was cheering when things really started blowing up for Adam.
Panic attack.
Panic
Definitely
attack.
That's what I mean by Hannah not being able to win. Do you really want to vote for somebody who has panic attacks in every tribal? Right? You want to vote for somebody who are like, wow, like even if they didn't, even if they didn't plan that tribal, like they navigated it really well, right? They went with the flow of the season. They pivoted. You don't want to vote for somebody who's having a panic attack in tribal, right? Like maybe panic attack is a challenge. Maybe panic attack in tribal. No.
Yeah. I'm surprised you're not more sympathetic to Hannah with the panic attack.
I am sympathetic. I'm very, very sympathetic. I don't want to come off wrong. I just don't think it's a strategy or a look that will win you the game. Mm-hmm. I think that panic attacks are real. I think that Hannah is, brave and courageous for talking about them publicly and for going on a show where she must have known this was going to be difficult for her. I think she's dealt with it very well on the show. I'm just not sure that, just in the way that I feel like people vote people off on Survivor because they're Black or they're women, I don't think people are going to vote for Hannah because she's having a lot of panic attacks.
You don't think
this is a judgment on to win? Yeah, this is a judgment on the game and the kind of play that is rewarded. This is not my personal opinion on panic attacks.
Yes. Okay. What is specifically the kind of play that's rewarded in your opinion?
I think it's different, right? It's like not always the same, but it's either somebody who is super nice or somebody who really kind of controlled the game or somebody's really good at going with the flow. I don't know. I'm not writing the rules of Survivor and the rules of, what could win or whatever the, evolution of strategy thing is that you did. But I do think that I'm a good critic and I don't think you can win with a panic attack.
Okay. You think a panic attack is disqualifying, Sophie?
Now you're making me question it. Is there a scenario in which a panic attack at tribal is not disqualifying? No, I'm not going to say that's a hard and fast rule because I would say I almost had a panic attack at tribal, the one where I cried. So I just don't think the way Hannah's having her panic attacks and the way that she's responding to like not that big deals at tribal, it doesn't look good for a
yeah, but I do feel like that it's not disqualifying in the same way that you are talking about like the tribal council where you cried, because I think that for when you did that, I thought that it was so against type and the exterior that you had throughout the whole game of being tough. And then when you sort of let your guard down and got emotional, I thought that humanized you in a way, and maybe that in some way helped in the minds of the jury. And I feel like that at least for Hannah, she has sort of like this low baseline with these panic attacks that people could say like, oh my God, can you believe this? Perhaps they're thinking that. But if she's able to somehow persevere and, have some sort of like, okay, here's where I was at this point, and then turn it on in the last 10 days. No, Sophie, you're nodding no.
Isn't that what Aubrey did? And she didn't win.
Might have been extenuating circumstances.
I just think that's the story we had last season, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But people said she should have won.
But she didn't.
Yeah, she could have won. Look, every jury is different too. So it really comes down to the makeup of the jury as well. Johnny D.
I think we almost just had a he said, she said on this, by the way. Okay.
Johnny D. Savera says, who in Survivor history originated voting out an ally due to a potential vote split? And I guess he gave us the answer also. It was Alex Angarita.
Who's that? They were on Survivor.
Yeah. The last time we were in Fiji, Sophie. Okay. Brandon Holmquist says, which girlfriend was Tails talking about in his final words? I believe he was talking about Fiji.
Can't be sure.
I mean, he was like 3 weeks ago, they were asking if you're going to get married.
Yeah, no, he was talking about Figgy. What did he want to do? He want to sail on a boat with her? Taylor is so romantic.
He's a very romantic guy, very romantic millennial.
Very romantic. Yeah.
He's not like a grizzled, like, passionless Gen Xer like me.
Yeah, we should all be more like Taylor.
We should. All right, let's do two more questions. Darren Chan says, Sophie, if you were on this season, who would you align with and why? And why is it Zeke, Sophie?
I think I would definitely go with the Nerd Alliance, right? I think
even though they're not in the numbers?
No, even though they're not the number. I mean, I'm imagining a scenario in which I get the numbers with the Nerd Alliance. But I think the thing that appeals to me about this particular Nerd Alliance, other than Zeke, is that unlike you, I truly believe that many of them can't win. And so like, I don't know, David, maybe, but I don't see Hannah winning. I don't see Adam winning. I think often the nerds on Survivor are very, very likable, right? And they're the kind of people that get to the end and they do win. And so I think the cool thing about this season is that you actually have a kind of a group of some unlikable nerds, which is like a perfect scenario where you align with them, for the game. They're strong allies. You can talk to them easily, and then you beat them in the end.
Yeah.
It's a good group, though. I find this season to be like most people before this episode. I found most people to be likable, and then I got cranky this episode.
Yeah, Unlikable Nerds was the first name we had for this podcast before we called it Survivor Know-It-Alls.
That would have been a good name.
Would have been a good name.
Do you have your dinger for that one? I wish I had a dinger.
Yes. All right. Let's do one more question with Sophie. Ryan McMurray says, how could Taylor have played telling Adam's secret at Tribal Council better, or should he have not said anything? Sophie, I know we talk so much right now. Oh, live tribal. Oh, anything could happen. Is there any way that you could parlay that secret at Tribal Council into potentially getting the vote on to Adam, or does that card need to be played before you leave for Tribal?
Yeah, so I don't get why they didn't play it before. Excuse me. I imagine it's something to do with timing, right? Like there's never enough time before Tribal. I definitely feel like Taylor didn't play it in the best way. Like Taylor doesn't do anything in the best way, right? Like Taylor and Jay are such perfect people to sit next to each other because Jay is kind of just like the savvier version of Taylor. And I loved it when Jay even said that in the episode. Like he has so much insight into himself. He was like, no, I'm not a stupid surfer dude. And then this whole season's been about that, right? It's about the two of them making the same moves, but Jay just doing it like in a slightly smarter way. Mm-hmm. And so Jay really came out on top of this episode, right? Like he managed to go there, get the opportunity to potentially flip it on Adam, while at the same time recognizing that if it didn't go that way, Taylor was going to be the boot. Yeah. Do I think Taylor played it well? No, right? Like he overplayed it with the whole, like, he's going to take your people, he's going to take your heart. That said, like Adam was scrambling, right? Like Adam did look like a little bit of a weasel. He was on his back feet. For a moment there, I thought that maybe people would go for Adam. I think where he read the room wrong is that millennials, or the millennials maybe would have been more pissed at Adam, which I think is probably true. I think that didn't help with Adam's case with Zeke and Hannah. But the Gen Xers, like they care about good old fashioned morals and who's stealing.
Especially Ken.
Yeah, exactly.
Ken is like, these millennials, if they don't tell us what's happening, how can we trust them? That's holding information back is the same as lying. Yeah.
Ken's cuter than you are when he says that.
Wow, that's damning with faint praise, Sophie. So here's what I need your help with, Sophie. So while Steven is away, hanging out in India, don't ask me why. So I'm also writing Steven's blog for people.
Fishy time.
Fishy time. Sophie, I don't know who out of this cast gets a fishy this week. I feel like this is one of the tougher weeks.
This is really hard.
I don't know who I could necessarily. I mean, I have a bunch of thoughts floating around in my head, but I don't know if nobody jumps out at me.
What are your thoughts? Bounce your ideas off me. I'm looking at the list I made of everybody's names.
Yeah, let me spitball with you. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking about Jay.
Yeah, so Jay is somebody that comes to mind for me as well. The question I have for Jay is, was he ever really at risk this episode? It's unclear to me if he really saved himself this episode or if he just kind of had a last-ditch effort and nothing happened. But Jay did come out of this episode, he was at risk. He's no longer at risk. He still has his idol in his pocket. There's a lot of suspicion on Adam now, a lot of attention on Adam, not necessarily on him. There's also a big alliance with only 2 people at the bottom, or 2 people out. And I feel like the longer you're able to last in a situation like that, the more likely it is that big alliance is going to break, right? Like that big alliance maybe is going to break with 3 people out of it. But when 2 people are out of it, it becomes more and more obvious that like it's almost down to the big alliance. And usually that big alliance, I'm going to go on a limb here, cracks before it just gets to the big alliance, right? Because usually somebody feels in the bottom. So, I mean, maybe Jay is the right vote. I think he may have gotten far enough out of this, tight situation to then last a little while longer as other people eat themselves.
Sophie, I killed him last week. I said that it was 100% clear he made the wrong move in voting out Michaela. I think he still made the wrong move, but I don't feel like he's as dead in the water as I did feel like going into this episode.
I think he's going to last for a while. I think we're going to see a lot of, Gen X eat Gen X. I'm just running through the list. You can't give it to Hannah. Will, Zeke didn't do anything. Adam, definitely not. Taylor, Chris, David. No, I think it has to go to Jay, right?
Give it to Jay. But I bet this would be like a week Steve would be like, I'm giving the fishy to Jeff Probst because he let the action play out at Tribal Council in such an amazing way.
Guess what? Steven's not here. We get to play.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Let's give it to Brett for getting drunk.
Yeah, Brett got drunk and didn't throw up, so good for him. He held his liquor. All right, Sophie, are you feeling any better?
I'm feeling a little better. Wait, can I just say one thing? Because I wrote it down and I forgot to say. It's not even that important. But I wrote this down because I meant to mention this at the Know-It-Alls a couple weeks ago, and then I forgot to. I just want to know if anybody else noticed this. It's a little risque. But do you remember the episode where there was Ken just kept getting hit in the balls?
Yes.
Okay. In that same episode, as they were walking to the challenge, and the only reason I even noticed this was because I'm reading the funny 115, which is like really good actually, and everybody should read it. It's really funny. Funny115.com. And when Ken is walking into that challenge, there is like a very close crotch shot of Ken, and he like adjusts his balls. Did anybody else notice that? Like, is that a thing you guys talked about?
How deep does this crush run on Ken?
I don't know, but I just want to do a little PSA. If anybody could look up that moment, I really think it was like very clever editor foreshadowing of like Ken adjusting his balls before going into the challenge where his balls get broken.
Wow. So
that was one of my notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it was just like I noticed it before even the challenge. I was like, why was there such like the close crotch shot of Ken?
Chekhov's balls. Note. Yeah. All right.
I liked legal warfare. Did you like legal warfare?
Legal warfare. You like that as a hashtag?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good
hashtag. I was gonna offer you also the soap opera season.
Oh no, let's do that.
Soap opera season. That's your SOS. Soap opera season. Soap opera season.
Ooh, that's good. Hey, Rob, I know you're trying to get me off here, but what if I read my notes and I find something interesting? Should I put it on Twitter?
No, tell me right now.
Okay, well, I'm just looking through them.
Okay.
I can't really read them.
As Sophie's looking at her notes, let me just tell you what's coming up tomorrow, of course. This man, Spencer Bledsoe, tweeted during the episode, they're really going to balance balls on bows and not on poles when I go on RHAP. That hurts. Spencer Bledsoe will join me tomorrow on the podcast. You can email in questions, survivor@robhasawebsite.com. And then also get your voicemails in for my podcast with Megan Z. If you listened over the summer when we did our off-season podcast, about 25 sound clips that should have been on the soundboard from TEOS, that was Megan. You can hear her tomorrow on the voicemails, robhasawebsite.com/voicemail or 323-282-RHAP. And of course, exit interview with Taylor, assuming he's doing exit press and not, at Lamaze class. Sophie.
I don't want to end on a bad note, but my other parallel to the election was when I think it was Brett said at Tribal, and he was like, there's several different errors. We have to figure out who's the most culpable. And it's like, no, Donald Trump, Hillary, not the same level of errors, like emails, misogynist, racist. I felt like that a little bit Tribal.
Sophie, that's such a stretch from what he even said on Survivor. You gotta take a deep breath, Sophie.
Reward that is part of the game.
You gotta take a deep breath.
I know. I was feeling good, man. How many Twitter?
We're having fun. We're having fun talking about this. There are a lot of. I believe that the majority of the people in this country are good people, Sophie.
I believe that too. God, yes. I know. I believe that too. I believe it too. Sorry if I'm a little low energy, everybody. I'm on painkillers for my back and muscle relaxants.
It's okay. It's okay, Sophie. I just want you to be like I don't like seeing you like this.
I know. I need to go on vacation. I've been going to the movies every day by myself. I went and saw Doctor Strange today by myself.
Yes. How was it?
It was good. It was better than Arrival.
Yes. Arrival wasn't good. I wanted to see that.
Yeah. Moonlight's good. You should see Moonlight. Are we still on air?
We're still on the air. Yeah.
All right. Well,
I had tweeted out that I thought that the only Marvel movie that might not work is the hashtag Avengers of Fiji. I feel like that might be the only one that potentially could be a bust.
that's good. That's good. That might be a bust. Oh man, that child. Oof. Okay.
Okay. All right. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad that we were able to do this. Originally, you were supposed to be on with us last week. I mean, could you imagine last Wednesday night if you were on with us?
Man, Rob, I was supposed to, the reason I wasn't on with you is because I was supposed to play in my soccer championship game for the league, and I couldn't even go to the game because I was crying. So.
Okay. All right, Sophie. All right. Well, you did a great job.
You did a great job. You're so good at this.
No, this is old hat for me, but always a pleasure to talk to you. I always look forward to it. One of the great minds, I think also one of the great underappreciated minds of Survivor.
Thank you. I feel like I just won a trophy.
Yes, participation trophy. Yeah, Jeff really was trying to shoehorn in participation trophy into the tribal council. Like, we weren't even talking about anything about participation trophy, and Jeff's like, "Is it like a trophy?"
We should have made like a millennial bingo before the season started. That was like participation's a trophy.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, Sophie, great stuff. You can follow Sophie on Twitter at Sophie. Or should people? Are you going crazy on Twitter right now?
I'm a little political these days. Okay. I'm gonna back off soon.
Okay. Look,
you can follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, and Sophie, look. I think that it's fine to be political. Just, you got to be constructive. We can't all be name calling.
I know. You don't understand how much I want to just comment on Tommy Lauren's videos and tell her she's such a fucking idiot.
And that's not helping. That doesn't help anything, Sophie.
I know.
That doesn't help anything. I
haven't done it. So I don't even want to.
That doesn't even change anybody's minds. You're just venting at that point.
I know. This has been really good. Thanks, Rob, for having me on. I feel a lot better.
Look, everybody just needs to take a deep breath, and we need to work through our differences. We need a tribal council.
We do. Oh my God, we do need a tribal council.
Yes. All right, Sophie. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on the podcast on the Live Know-It-Alls. Sophie, really appreciate you filling in. Steven will be back with us next week. A 2-hour Survivor next week, Sophie.
What? Is Steven going to do a 2-hour know-it-alls? Seems like he should.
No, we won't do a 2-hour know-it-alls, but maybe we'll do like an hour, 20 minutes or something like that. Okay.
You should everybody stop it after an hour, DVR, do a know-it-alls, do another know-it-alls.
Yeah, I guess so, but I don't think anybody would wait for us. People will spoil the show for us before we get to the end. All right. So Sophie, great stuff. Thanks so much to Scott St. Pierre behind the scenes. Jordan Parhar's got the BBOTT live recap coming up in about 90 minutes. Did you follow the OTT?
I love OTT.
Or only the OTTN?
Yeah, love it.
You do? Really?
No, I actually decided not to. It's too much. It's too much. Big Brother takes over my life. It can only take over so many months, or else I wouldn't even be a person. How would I have time to go to the movies?
Okay. What's the next movie you're going to see?
I'm going to see the Magical Creatures thing this week. I really don't have a job or anything. I'm a millennial. Just sit around protesting, watching movies.
Yes. Okay. All right, Sophie. Great stuff. Take care, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with our Taylor exit interview and much more. Take care, everybody.
Bye.